Hi, this is Lucas, and I would like to present you the second game of the Sinquefield Cup 2013 between world number one player Magnus Carlsen and I think number two player in the US now, Kamsky. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, certainly this is the last tournament before the World Championship in Chennai against Vichy Anand. So for the chess world and Team Anand especially, it might be very, very interesting how Kaz, plays in this tournament, what he prepared, what kind of positions he aims for. Because it's very likely that he might repeat those positions in his match against Anand. If he managed to close some gaps which were shown in the recent candidate matches, that even he, under immense pressure, that even he can collapse in his game against Svidler and Ivanchuk. But okay, knight f3, very, very flexible move, and also very, very solid in a way, because you can play each kind of position. You can play the English Open, you can play the Queen's Pawn Open, you can go for g3, and I mean, the castle after c5, you can even go for a Sicilian, so it's very, very flexible. Knight f6, keeping things flexible as well, and in a way forcing white to show his hand, and Carlsen chose the English opening. Okay, as far as I know, Kamsky prefers e5 against the English, but c6 is certainly an interesting attempt to transpose back into Queen's Gambit openings, and that's what happens after d4, d5. You get the Slav defense of the Queen's Gambit, and a move which Carlsen in a way popularized recently is e3, which I think Gelfand was one of his main victims, where he scored incredibly well in this type of positions, and it would be interesting to see what he analyzed there. But I assume that that's something he would like to use in his World Championship match against Anand, so that's why he didn't play this move. Knight c3 is the classical way. Now we have a classical Slav position where d takes c4 leads to the classical Slav after a6, to prevent b5. Or you can also play e6, which is the semi-Slav. You can either go for the Miran system, for the Botvinnik lines. It's a very, very sharp opening. But Kamsky is maybe the world's leading expert in the a6 Slav, the Chepanenko Slav. I wonder if this variation won't be somehow renamed in American variation or US variation, I don't know. But it's very, very, it's one of his main openings. e3, bishop f5, which is interesting. It's a kind of a surprise move. I mean, more common you see here b5, or e6, which is a transposition to a semi-Slav. I think it was played by Anand in his recent World Championship match in Moscow against Boris Gelfand. I think it's a position which aroused there. So any player who would like to look more deeply into this line should study the games from the World Championship match in Moscow. Bishop f5 is certainly interesting. I mean, the logical drawback of this move, or let's say that the main drawback of this move is b7 is weak now. So the logical continuation might have been queen b3, as was even played in the World Cup, I think, between Tomaszewski and also an American now, Alejandro Ramirez, who also publishes some DVDs for Chessbase recently. Queen b3 was an attempt to exploit this immediately, but after b5, well, just threatening to take on c4, c5, and very strong with a5. Suddenly, black gets counterplay. Knight e5, a4. If the queen decides to go there, knight a6 comes maybe with tempi even. Or let's say first queen c7 and then knight a5 hitting the queen. So she simply lacks some squares here. So queen d1 happened, and after g6, g4, a very aggressive attempt, but in a way it's just weakening. Bishop e6, h3, bishop g7, and black was not at all very not worse in the game Tomaszewski against Ramirez in Tromsø 2013. I'm sure Magnus knew this position, knew this game, and therefore he played bishop d3. It's of course a move which certainly looks too easy for black. I mean, he exchanges his good bishop for the opponent's light's good bishop, which is certainly a bad bishop because the pawns will be arranged on the light squares. But this is a very typical Carlsen approach, which aims for a small and very, very simple position. I mean, what does white has? He has a lead in development. Okay, this is a small edge. But black's position is very solid, so it's not easy to exploit this at all. And e6 comes, bishop d6 might come, bishop b4 might come, bishop e7 might come, knight bd7 comes, castle, and suddenly black seems to have a reasonable game. And white actually is trying to build up small advantages, not allowing a simplification, a simplification in a way that the position gets dull, but he tries to keep some pressure. I mean, the main idea in this position here for white here is to play e4 and count on a small space advantage. That's always something that is similar to the Catalan and some other Slav lanes with an early e3, that you try to push e4 and get a small edge. I mean, it's usually black can hold, but it's some pressure. Okay, e6, cancel, bishop e4. Bishop e7 is also possible, but now, in my opinion, he gets a small edge. e4, d takes, and knight e7. If knight f6, it's okay, but c5 is the main idea. Try to break and try to get some space, but the b7 pawn would be hanging. That's the main drawback right now. And I think of something like maybe rook d1 probably, knight f6, e2 or c2. In that case, I would even go for c2, I think, because one idea might be sometimes to push the pawn to c5 to fix the structure, and then try to pressure this pawn here on b7. Might be an idea. But even after something like this, I mean, c5 is certainly not possible right now because we just take and back up the pawn, right? And even after something like, I don't know, queen c7, we might even consider something like g3 and bishop f4. But maybe this is also very simple with the idea of bishop h4 and bishop g3. Might be good enough. Or maybe even another idea, which is b3. Okay, I've cancelled bishop e2, c5. Takes, maybe takes, or just wait. You can also just try to double. Takes, bishop takes. Bishop is very active here, and no, we have a pawn majority on the queen side and a bit more space, so it's something that I would say gives white a small edge. Okay, bishop e4 is also not bad, and okay, bishop d2, simple move, bishop takes, which is interesting. To be honest, I didn't expect this move when it was played, and I'm not sure if this gives white maybe all he wants. I mean, certainly if someone follows Carlsen's games, you can see that he's trying to build up small advantages, and here he gets something that he likes, an imbalance. An imbalance in the case of a bishop against a knight. And this is something that should prove very good for him. For example, after castle, a4, okay. I mean, if black wants to get rid of this weakness, I mean, rook a3 might come, rook b3, and suddenly the pawn's under pressure. Also c5, maybe later on queen c3, queen b4, queen a5, something like this. It's always not tying up the weakness. White is simply trying to play a5, fixing the pawn. So in case of an advance to b4, he can take en passant and yeah, have a better structure. So knight b7, a5, fixing the hole on b6, so even the knight cannot go to b6. Knight e4. And black wouldn't have any major problems if he were to take here on c3. I'm not sure. I mean, even if he manages to take it, for example, after rook f to b1, as an example, if he takes, of course it might look serious because suddenly this pawn might be weak, and maybe something like c5 might come. Yeah, the knight, or maybe c5. We can even maybe wait with this move and play knight d2, knight b3, knight c5, and adding some pieces to the attack of this pawn. So it's not very clear and very easy for black to play. So maybe my comment that black would be happy about this was a bit maybe premature. But certainly, okay, white wants to preserve the bishop pair, so he plays bishop b4. And taking the pawn here is not possible due to the capture on e4. So this is also not an idea. Rook e8, okay, has to be played because the rook is attacked. Rook a to c1, and certainly in terms of space and in terms of minor pieces, white has a slight edge. I mean, this knight might prove a bit unstable here, especially after white's next idea, which he might have exploited later on. I will show you some lines. It's simply not easy to see any concrete plan for black. I mean, c5 is certainly not very good. It just helps to activate this bishop here, and he has a very easy plan of moving this knight and then playing f3 e4 in classical Slav style to gain more space. And it's especially this kind of position and type of position which Carlsen likes, to accumulate small advantages and then to play with them until you get something very concrete. And it's true to his style, and I'm sure that's the position which he likes. So Kamsky decides to go a bit off beat here and trying to create something, maybe pushing the pawn down the board and getting something for it. And this decision took him a very long time. I mean, he said after the game, I think, that he simply didn't want to give Carlsen the type of position he likes and he excels, and so he tried to attack instead of defend, which is also always much easier. So, okay, Carlsen thought that this move was weird, and certainly at a later stage it might prove that this move is also very weakening, but there's nothing concrete to be exploited now. Knight e5. And now it comes. Now after knight takes e5, d takes e5, all of a sudden this knight certainly lacks some squares. The only square is g5, after which he can go to h7. Okay, but this is nothing he should be really happy about. So queen c7, going for the knight. He exchanges it off, takes, and also very subtle queen e2. f3 is another idea, with the typical plan of playing e4, but queen e2 is also not bad. Trying to gain some time, improve the queen, maybe move the rook to d1, and still attacks this pawn here. Knight f6. Kamsky does not wait for this move to happen. Knight f6, rook f to d1, queen c7. I mean, certainly he wants to play e5, but after e takes d5, rook takes d5, I'm not sure about this move here, this capture, because of the bishops. For example, let's just move it. E5 takes, rook takes, and now very important, bishop c3. The rook has to move. Say something like this, and now we capture here. And the pawn structure certainly favors white, especially after the capture on h5. It's difficult to defend. So queen c7, h3, with a similar idea actually. If e5, he first takes. The drawback of the queen on c7 is that this rook certainly eyes her, so if you take, he cannot recapture. White would like to play this, but it's not possible. After this, It's back. Takes. And he has several moves. He can take here. He can first take there. So maybe, certainly not this. C takes d5 might be maybe the best here. I mean, he cannot recapture, threatens to take here, threatens to take on h5. So position is just horrible for him. Rook a to d8, b3, backing up the pawn on c4, and rook d7. Black has less space than white, that's true, but he has enough space to maneuver, because usually if there's less space, you have difficulties coordinating your pieces, and you usually have pieces which share the same squares. But here in that case, it's not real troublesome. I mean, you can sometimes maneuver here. Rook d8, you can play rook e7. Okay, not now, but later on can play rook e7 if the bishop moves. So here is some time to maneuver, and you can maybe move the queen somehow a bit. So it's not obvious how white will continue. Maybe the only real plan is to play f3 and so on, but it also weakens some dark squares then. Rook c2, queen d8, rook c1 back, and now h4. Black wants to put the knight on e4, but the pawn would be hanging, so he first moves it forward, still keeping an eye on this pawn, and now can play e4, knight e4. So bishop goes to e1, with the idea that this bishop here already eyes the pawn on h4. Queen g4, as I mentioned before, eyeing the pawn, and now in a way it's just threatening f3, hitting the knight and opening up the line for the bishop, attacking this pawn twice. Therefore Kamsky has to react on it, and with g5 he prepares a kingside pawn storm. C takes d5, f5. One has to mention that at this point Kamsky was already rather low on time, because it's not easy to to decide, to cut off lines which might give the opponent the game he wants, and it's always a very practical choice, and I guess it was pretty time consuming against Carlsen. Queen f3, and now rook takes d5 was another interesting idea, especially now this pawn is always a bit weak, but you can also try to play it now for e5 maybe. And certainly it keeps the c5 closed, which is good for black. C takes d5. Now this rook has the potential to become very, very good. Rook c2, rook g7. Black doesn't mind to play for the c5, he wants to push on the king side. Because if we go into an ending, this advanced pawns might prove to be a telling weakness. Need to c1, so he won the c file. Knight f6, queen d1, just maneuvering around. I mean, certainly you can also try to play rook c5, rook c2, queen c1, and suddenly you have enough grip on the c file to penetrate on c8. g4. What else? But now, what I missed to mention is that instead of knight f6, g4 was maybe a bit more interesting. Certainly, I mean, if he goes to f4, this opens up and it's probably just losing. It's very serious. But if he closes diagonal, adds this file, I'm not quite sure. Queen f4 maybe, and with this he can maybe always play g3. It's very, very unclear. I mean, I'm not sure if he has enough. I mean, taking looks very, very risky. If this, to be honest, I'm not sure how to assess this position. This looks tremendously difficult and dangerous for white. It was maybe better, but knight f6, queen d1, and g4. There's an amazing resource which Kamsky missed, as he said. He just calculated taking here and something like king h2, trying to block it otherwise, but f3 is an amazing resource, because suddenly this bishop comes to life. If g3, everything is closed, no attack. But g takes h3, bishop take h4, led to a situation where black simply panicked. Because all of a sudden, white has a very, very serious threat in a way, which is something like rook c8 probably. Because if the queen takes, rook takes, rook takes, rook stands on c8, and the bishop can take the knight on f6. I'm not sure. I mean, this might be wrong, but I'm not certainly sure, because it looks very dangerous. I mean, we can also try to calculate here on the clip here. For example, rook c8 takes, bishop takes. What about check? If he goes there, I think simple rook c2, and with rook f2 check, for example, if it's black to move, check, goes back, goes there, and if he has to take the rook on f2, after which rook takes c1 and h2 and h1 comes, and yeah, probably just lost here. Therefore, let's say king h1, and now after rook c2, it looks way too dangerous. I mean, yeah, okay, if this is just losing here, it would be mate, so the queen has to sacrifice herself to this. It's just lost. Let me see elsewhere. Yeah, so maybe this idea was wrong, but yeah, unfortunate. I think it's just not enough. I mean, even if king f1 there, this is not possible due to mate. It looks risky. But h takes g2 was an interesting idea, maybe by black. I'm not quite sure about rook c8 now. This might be better. Because what does he want to do? If now rook c8, okay, if the queen goes there, simply bishop takes f6, and the queen is overloaded. Takes check, just losing. Rook c8, queen there, yeah, this is maybe the idea. Yeah, that's maybe the only move to defend. And if rook there, rook takes here. If this, knight takes, and it's completely losing for white. If okay, rook takes, queen takes. Okay, this is not possible, so maybe the other rook. But even here I don't think it's enough. No, I don't think it's enough. I mean, going back, protecting the bishop, taking, queen there, with the idea of giving check, picking up the pawn, and maybe even try to increase the pressure here. But I don't think it's enough. King f7 is a bit too optimistic. The simple reason being that the king is very exposed there, and a very nice move, queen e1, shows the serious drawback of it. I mean, rook c7 comes, and yeah, this might prove just fatal. I mean, I don't see how black would like to fend off the attack, especially in time trouble. So h takes g2, rook c7, check, rook e7. If the king goes there, then queen g3 wins on the spot. King moves, mate. So rook e7. Now rook c8, decisively penetrating the 8th rank, and the king is no way of some problems. I mean, he does only have one square left, which is g6, and after queen d6, bishop takes, king takes, the queen enters the game. Check, rook g6, and now very, very powerful f4. Simply closing everything off. I mean, black doesn't have any counterplay. One idea is here to double the trouble. And okay, queen a3, and taking the rook. So in case of rook h8 or something like this, the rook would be hanging with the check. Queen h8, simple threat. Queen f8 mate. Rook g7 has to come, freeing the square g6. Queen h5, rook g6, making the time control. After queen h8, rook g7. Of course, not going for a repetition of moves, but playing queen f8. The king moves, and now very, very strong. King takes g2. He's opening up the g file, and the rook might come. And he cannot really do anything about it. I mean, if the king moves somewhere, just king f3, and all of a sudden, I think, yeah, rook h1, rook g1, and taking is simple. For example, if it's now more white to move, we can exploit the unstable position of the queen there. Check, only move. Check, only 2 squares, and if he goes there, it's even checkmate. But if he goes here, pardon, did I miss something? Not quite. I can just take here, and if he takes, I can pick up the queen. Let me see if there's a mate here. Yeah, probably this. Yeah, if he goes rook g6, it's mate. If he moves there, it's also checkmate. And if he goes to h7, it's just mate with rook h1. Yeah, so it's even a forced mate. So after rook gf7 instead of king h6 check, queen d8, rook h7, and now it comes rook g1. Next move, king f3. Too many attackers for the king. Queen a2, king f3 check, king f6, queen g8, nasty little threat, rook g8 mate, rook h3, rook g3 check takes, and now he cannot really prevent him. We cannot really stop being mated. I mean, what's just threatening now, let's take it as a new variation here. If it's white to move, he first of all threatens to check, only move, check, only move, check, only move, checkmate. And due to the threats, which black cannot really parry, this is all forced now. The only idea he might have is to go for rook g7. But after rook f8 check, if there, it's just mate. If the king moves, check. And I think, the most simple might be something like queen e5 check. If he goes there, it's check. Here is checkmate, as well as here. And king e8 is just a transposition. Check, mate. Okay, so after queen e5, he has to probably go to c6. But then I take king. Okay, if he goes there, it's I think even simply mate. If he goes to p5, we give a check. Only move is to go there. And now queen c4 check. If king takes there, it's made in few moves. And if he goes to a3, this might be the only way to stop, or maybe a mate here, but it's obviously totally losing here. So that's why after queen takes g3, yeah, he resigned. Well, it's kind of an interesting game. I mean, with every move you almost could feel how Kamsky had the difficult, also psychological task of avoiding lines which give Carlsen the play he desperately aims for, and it's kind of interesting also for club players and tournament players to learn something out of it, because you will often face players who like end games more than, I don't know, open games, who like attacking more than, I don't know, positional squeeze, something like this. So it's always interesting to evaluate this, small nuances, because each line has its own character, and in that case, I mean, Kamsky tried as hard as he could, but he wasn't able to outplay Carlsen, and in the end got outplayed himself. Very, very good play. Thanks for watching.